I'd like to give a special shout out to all my patrons, my Wildlings Knights watching Kingsguard. My Kingsguard include Brendan, Nick, Oscar, Stuart, Josephine, Ikaika, Amanda, RJ, Shad, Nicoletta, Tanner, Jennifer, Sarah, Pat, Kevin, Ryan, Michael, Terrence, Wade, Darren, FM, and Derry. Thank you all so much. You're the best. This is like the 8th time I filmed this intro, so I better land it this time. Welcome back to the Fantasy Network, everyone. My name is, of course, Jimmy Nuts, and today we're going to be doing a no-spoiler review for The Emperor's Blades by Brian Staveley, which for some reason gets me all kinds of tongue-tied, and I can't explain why. But this is book 1 in the Unhewn Throne trilogy, and this is a book that made its way on my must-read for 2022, and that's for a couple of different reasons. One of them happens to be that the newest book from Brian Staveley is a sequel trilogy, and it's a book 1 in this world. Really, really well received. Also, there was a standalone novel in this world that was also very well received. People were really excited about it, saying that he had improved so much as an author. So I said, well, publication order is king, as my friend Scott always says, and I decided to go ahead and jump into Staveley's work. The other reason why I was so excited about this is the fact that Alan from Library of Alexandria is hosting a read-along right now, and this was the book for February, and then each month subsequent after this, we will be reading book 2 and 3. So I wanted to jump in, multiple people reading it, that's always fun, and it's just something I wanted to dive into. I just wrapped up Malazan recently, and I was definitely in a little bit of a post-series slump, but I was also excited to get into something new and to start a new trilogy here, or in really a bigger series if you count the sequel stuff. Unfortunately, I don't think that this book is one that is going to be seared into my mind for any positive reason, and at the end of it left me feeling a bit underwhelmed. Now, I was asked, did the hype affect this for you? And I have to say, I don't think that there was really a lot of hype as far as like, this is the greatest book ever. I've not really seen anyone say that about this first book. Now, Empire's Ruin has a decent amount of hype behind it, but I was expecting a debut novel from a debut author, which is exactly what this is. Unfortunately, I've read a lot of really good debuts in the last 2 years, and this is not going to land in that upper echelon of debuts. Now, I do think that there are some positives to come out of this book, and as filming this, I am still unsure if I will be continuing the read-along. It's going to probably be a game time decision, and maybe by the time I talk all my thoughts out here with you, I'll have a decision by the end of the video. I'm not sure. But let's go over the things that I actually enjoyed and also kind of talk about what this book's about. So to keep this spoiler-free, all I'm going to say is that the Emperor's dead. And it is something that we hear all the time in fantasy. And some of you might groan and maybe even be tired of that. I'm not. I love a ruler or a head of a state or a nation going down and then seeing the fallout from that. It's actually probably one of my favorite premises to start a fantasy series. And it works here too. On paper it sounds good, and I would say in execution it could have been maybe a little bit better, but that is what we have here. So the Emperor has 3 children. There is the heir, which is Valen. Hey, real quick, I just said that Valen is the heir. That is incorrect. It's actually Caden the monk. I got that mixed up whenever I was talking about it, but I just want to clear that up real quick. Who is hanging out with the Kestrels. I should say hanging out, but really he's enlisted into this military order called the Kestrels. They fly birds. They're kind of assassin-like. They're pretty interesting. Some of the execution, not so much, but we have that, right? So we have the military type kid. And each one of his kids seem to have a discipline to kind of help the kingdom survive once he would be gone. Obviously, this emperor's death was unexpected, so there's probably some messy things happening in the background there, and conspiracy. But then we go all the way to a different part of the world, and then we see Caden. And Caden is his son that is training to be a monk. That's pretty cool. I like monks in my stories. I think that they're pretty cool, as long as they're executed well. And a lot of the backstory and lore actually comes from Caden's POV. He's searching for enlightenment, all that good stuff that monks apparently do. And then you have the daughter, which is Adair, which I can't help but to think is like Adele's backwoods cousin. I don't know. Adair, not a great name. But Adair is in this story. She is the daughter, and she has been kept close to her dad. And she is at court learning all the politics, learning how to rule, also kind of learning like finances and stuff like that. So that's kind of the setup for that. And then obviously you start reading and you wonder how they're all going to coalesce. And there is a mystery about what has happened to the emperor, along with some side mysteries that revolve around like history and lore of the world, an ancient race of sorts, which is one of my favorite tropes of all time. And then also just other murders happening and such. So there's a lot of mystery that's in the undercurrent of this book that I liked, and it kept it moving along. So as far as things that I liked from The Emperor's Blades, I really liked the prologue. And everyone I saw reading this pretty much liked the prologue. I thought it was like short, pointed, but man, asked the reader some tough questions about themselves possibly, but also kind of sets up this world in a manner that it seems like human emotion, at least to the main character we see, is almost like a downfall or a negative thing. It seems like this happened way in the past from what I could tell with the prologue. And then throughout the book, I will say every piece that I really enjoyed, like I really sunk my teeth into, was actually able to get immersed in, all tied back to what we saw in the prologue and getting like little bits of information there. So the prologue was fantastic. As far as the writing, I think it's serviceable. I think it's good. It's very straightforward. You're not going to get anything that's going to blow your mind here. However, I think that it is good to be straightforward and to be consumable. And one thing that Staveley does do extraordinarily well, I think, is his word choice. His word choice is very good to fitting the tone of the scene, the world building that's happening in the scene. And that is a trait in some of my favorite authors that they excel at. And Staveley does a good job in this first entry with that as well. The world does feel different from each POV. Like I do feel like they're in different places within this world. And a lot of the history and the lore here, really fascinating. You have multiple gods. There's like younger gods, all this stuff. It didn't really play too much of a role here in this first book, but that's something that might be able to get me to read books 2 and 3. So there's a lot of potential there. I don't necessarily know if it's delivered, but I do like the groundwork that was laid for the lore, the history, and the religions. And then other than like the world building and history, I think the magic's actually really good. And it's they're called leeches, which I'm not going to give it all away, but all you need to know is that they draw upon a well of some sort of resource. It could be anything. It could be copper, silver, or it could be dirt or anything. And it seems like there's a ton of possibilities, but also some limitations because you can drain yourself and drain your resource or your well. That could get really interesting down the road. And we do see a bit of it here. They're called leeches, right? And they are basically executed. If you have magic, you are being persecuted, unless if you're in the military, because of course we'll use your power then. I like this. This is a trope that I like. This is something I enjoy. Also seems like there could be consequences for using the magic outside of just social consequences. So this is something, again, on paper, I'm pretty there for. And I will tip my hat to Staveley for that magic system not being spoon-fed to you. Like, there's still more that you need to learn as you read through the book that I haven't told you. And he kind of throws you in the deep end with the magic details and then gives you pieces when you need it. And I like limited in context to make the reader think, help engage in the text. So for that piece, bravo, I really enjoyed that. But when it comes to positive, that's about it. Now I'm going to start talking about things I didn't like. These are all subjective to my experience and my read and what I got out of this at the time that I read it. But this is a book that just could not seem to get out of its own way. I keep saying on paper these things look good. If I told you the overview, which I kind of did, that sounds like an interesting book. And I will say there are points in this story that are interesting. Even though a lot of the plot twists, in my opinion, were predictable, I did feel like some of them, were interesting ways to go about the story. However, nothing about those twists or the big revelations in the plot felt natural to me. It felt very much like planned out points in the story, and then we got there. I would say my favorite POV should have been Adair, but we got so little of her in this story. That by the end, and especially like where she ends up towards the end of the story and what happens, I did not like it. I just did not. It almost felt, and I have no proof of this, but it felt like Adair was added to the story maybe after a first edit. I could be completely wrong, and I probably am. That's the feeling I got here with how limited she was. And also, she's in the court where the emperor died, which is like kind of the main focus of this story. And getting so little of it, that could be cool, right? You could limit information, filter things out to the brother. None of that's used to its potential at all. And then Valen, I wanted to like Valen so much. I wanted to enjoy the military aspect, but it was so inconsistent. And it is that academy feel for the Kestrel. And it reminded me of everything I did not like in the Poppy War in the first book. Kind of the same feeling. Very awkward, not consistent. These people are, in this really strict, league, but they're doing these heinous things. And it just seems like people are just inherently bad. Like, I don't know any of the motivations for the people who are doing evil things, which there happens to be a ton of evil people within the Kestrel, it would seem. And sure, that's going to happen. But this isn't like the Night's Watch, where like it was a thing of the past and now it's just all criminals and crooks and it's the worst of the worst. That's not it. This is supposed to be like the cream of the crop. And somehow the King's Heir is still kind of being treated like garbage, which is a little bit odd as well. But there was a bright spot, I thought, that could have helped this, because the side characters in the story did nothing for me. Not a single side character, unfortunately. Maybe a little bit later in the book, some of the stuff with Caden, maybe. But the one that sticks out to me is Lynn, which is Valen's friend. And I was excited. I said, okay, this might be able to round out Valen a little bit, get some more of the Kestrel perspective from a female's perspective. But everywhere this went, and every interaction they had, to me felt so forced. Even arguments that just didn't make sense. Like, would this really be happening now? And unfortunately, Lynn felt like nothing more than just a piece or a device for Valen to have emotions. And it just did not work for me, and I wanted it to. Like, I was rooting for this. Like, I gave it so many passes. But Lynn and Valen and the whole Kestrel thing did not work for me at all. I would love to say Adair was my favorite character, but there just wasn't enough of her, and I didn't like where she ends up at the end of the book. And then we have Caden. And I said earlier, I think I messed up. I said Valen was the heir. That's not true. Caden is the heir. I apologize for that. I forgot. And, Caden is chasing this enlightenment stuff, and he is the closest to the lore and the history, which is the things that I liked about this book. So there is a lot more to like here, except that it felt so repetitive. Not only with what he was doing, and some of it was just kind of silly, if I'm being honest. Like, the way to enlightenment just felt so cliche, like cringy, like martial arts films kind of come to mind, and some of the ways that they were trying to reach enlightenment. And I don't know, I found it to be very cheesy. And then on top of that, it felt like every single character had an adult above them that they either couldn't trust, didn't know their motivations, or they were downright abusive. And that's fine. You can do that, and it can work, right? Snape in Harry Potter comes to mind, right? But this got repetitive, because every single POV, apparently you shouldn't trust any adults. And I feel like I'm ranting a little bit, so I'm going to calm down. With that said, I think Caden would be my favorite POV, since he actually had a significant amount of chapters, unlike Adair. And I would say going forward, that would be a character that I might be able to get invested in. With that said, the ending for Caden in this book was extraordinarily rushed, I thought. And again, it felt like a lot of really good ideas, but not sure how to get there in between. And that is the running theme. Like I said, this book could not get out of its own way. And I got to talk about character descriptions, because I give a large pass to physical or even sexual descriptions being given, like the size of someone's breast or whatever. If it doesn't pull me out of the story, or if it serves a purpose from the perspective character to tell me something about them, that can work, okay? Now, sometimes I get just tired of reading it anyways. However, through multiple POVs, it felt like every single female we saw was getting the description of her hips and her breast, and it's just lazy. It felt lazy. I didn't like it, and it felt repetitive. And a lot of the stuff in this book ended up feeling repetitive to me, or again, awkward. And that's really it. I mean, at the end of the day, I didn't really attach to any of the characters. There were some interesting decisions with the plot, but a lot of it was so on the nose. Like, look here, look here, look here, it's here. That can be done very well. It was not done well here, in my opinion. And a lot of it just did not feel natural. Maybe this is more in line with what a debut is supposed to be for someone who picked up writing later in their life. That very well could be. And I'm trying to give a bit of a pass. Also, this cover, to say something about this cover, and all the covers of these books are excellent, by the way. I don't know who did the illustration. Maybe it's Felix Ortiz. I don't know. Whoever it is, great job. Will I continue with this? Well, by the end, I will say this. I feel like we're about to graduate from that academy setting. We're about to see a new arc for a lot of these characters, while also still having the underlying murder mystery plot going forward, and who killed the emperor and all the fallout from that. Where Adair is and the decision she makes, I don't know if I care, if I'm being honest. I would love to. I kind of want to see what happens, though. And there's a read-along, so that does make it a little bit better. But I have so many things I really want to get to that it's hard to slot in a book that I felt so 50-50 on, if not just flat out meh. So I don't know if I'll continue. It's going to be a game time decision next month. I thought maybe after I talked out these thoughts, and I'm sorry if this came across rambly, but I didn't take a ton of notes. I kind of just wanted to plow forward here. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see where I end up. This is one that I feel very mixed on, as you can tell. And I know that I might have... There's people who can enjoy this book. Like, it is a debut, so give it that. And I think that there's a lot of potential. It's just I'm not sure, especially with the other two books being bigger. I think book 3 is almost 900 pages or something like that. And book 2 is just over 700. I don't know if Staveley is the writer that would warrant that type of page count. and I don't know if I'm willing to stick around for all 700 pages to find out. But that's it. You know, mixed experience. There are not always going to be hits here, and as I read more and more things that I've never really read about, I'm going to have some misses. This happened to be mostly a miss, I would say. I was mostly negative instead of being mostly positive, as I usually am. But if you read this book for the read-along or whatever else, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it. Does anything I say ring true for you, or maybe you had a totally different experience and maybe you can help me see the light? I would love that. If you like this video, hit like. If you didn't like it, you can hit dislike. And if you love, think about subscribing here on the channel. I will be reviewing tons more books, and hey, who knows, maybe I'll continue with the Unhewn Throne trilogy. There is a Patreon in the description. It's optional, but always appreciated. And until I see you next time, make sure to be good, be safe, and remember to always keep turning the page.